This is Pam Electric Ghost, and we're live on the air with Morgan Boszilkov for the first time. Welcome to the Pam Electric Ghost podcast. How you doing tonight?
Oh, I'm so glad to be here. Thank you so much. I'm doing well.
Well, it's fun to talk to people from around the world. We've been podcasting since 2016. We're at over 1,200 episodes, and we just love to talk to different people from around the world and get their point of view out to our audience. And a couple questions before we get to the heart of your story. We always ask of any guest, what motivates you, and why do you do what you do?
Sure. That's a great question. Really gets to the heart of the matter, right? For me, I believe it is the heart that motivates me. At this point in my life, I've come through a lot, have alchemized a lot, turning the lead to gold. And now it's about following my heart and helping others do the same because I believe that all is love. And if I can spread the light and love just by being myself and sharing my authentic self, then I'm grateful for that opportunity.
I think that's why I talk to a lot of creative people. I see that you're a spirituality coach and an artist, and that's what the whole podcast has always been about, is talking to creators. And I just think creative people, like you take what's inside and what's outside yourself, and you synthesize that into something that resonates with other people. You kind of get to their frequency. As I'm a musician, the whole point of writing a song is to kind of trigger that frequency that other people can you know basically vibe to.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I love that. When I was down at an ayahuasca retreat in Costa Rica, I was talking to Michael Beckwith, and I had had this kind of understanding of the universe as the word universe, like one story, and he was like one song. And I was like, yes, I love that, right? Because we are each our own song, our own vibration. The song tells a story. And the way we connect with others is through our vibration. And that's what attracts or triggers other people is how we're vibrating and what we're singing, with our life. And oh yeah, I just love that. Yeah, the creative soul, I think that everyone's creative, right? It's just tapping into how
Yeah,
we express that.
I think it's a lot of times it's permission structure, because like people are told to get an education, and you're told to read all like Shakespeare. You're told to look at Beethoven and Bach. You look at Edison, Einstein, and you start to think, well, maybe I can't match that. So then people start thinking whatever they're creative about isn't at the level that I should present. And I think that's a mistake, because a lot of people get discouraged because they feel, well, I can't match that. I
Yeah,
can't.
go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was thinking, there's a comparison mindset. And I think that's such a part of the expectations and the conditioning that we grow up in, right? That sense of we're always on a ladder. There's always someone above us, there's always someone below us. And when we're in comparison mindset and our ego is um, always judging either ourselves or others, and there's a permission, like you said, there's a sense of permission when we're allowing the creativity to flow through us to work through whatever judgments are coming up and allow ourselves to process and free ourselves as they come up, because I haven't met one artist that doesn't have a sense of self-doubt
Oh
somewhere
yeah,
in their
it's
creative
always there.
process.
But a lot of times it's like it's the point of like, do you actually present your work, or do you hold back so much that you're kind of deep six in your own progress? And it's a matter of like balance, that like at certain points, like artists are always going to be self-critical. It's part of the nature of, I'm a musician. I've got tons of tracks I haven't presented, but I have been presenting like in an underground, like there's a place like on SoundCloud or Bandcamp, a different place. I've been presenting more of my work these days than I would have,
Oh,
because I've kind
cool.
of the idea is like, I don't know what's going to work. And if you talk to creative people, I've talked to, film directors, authors, painters, and a lot of times they're not really good judges of their own work. that they have to have people around them and kind of present, because if it's up to them, they wouldn't actually present some of their best work.
That's
So
so true. I have a question for you, if that's okay.
yeah,
So I wonder if you ever look back on a work that you created that you like really felt disappointed with at the time, and then you look back at it and go, yeah, that was actually pretty great.
yeah, it happens a lot, because a lot of times you're very self-critical of, like, some things that are maybe experimental or wasn't what your vision was, but it is what it is. And I've kind of learned from, like, I'm always like looking at, like what other artists do, because not a comparison trap, but just maybe just references. So I look, thinking about, like, Frank Zappa was known for recording like almost everything. He would record live performances, do anything he was doing, and he would go back to his living room and kind of look at everything. And it didn't matter what, if it was old or new or whatever. And he had more of a kind of like, he would just just put things together and just throw it together on at a board, kind of like, and that way you actually can trigger a lot of creativity, and things that you had thought didn't work actually work in the context of maybe this goes with something else. But if you think linearly in a linear fashion, then it has to be like in that moment, in that progression, in that succession, and then you make mistakes in terms of not realizing that sometimes your old catalog of stuff actually wasn't ready at that time, it's ready now.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, we weren't ready to receive it, right? Because I think that we're channeling the divine when we're creating. And so sometimes our ego isn't ready to receive what comes through us with the unconditional love that it deserves.
And how can, like, I guess, seg into what you do, like the benefits of plant medicine. It seems like a lot of people have, like, glass ceilings or walls, or they've got things they prevent further expansion. So in
Yeah,
terms of, like, a spiritual point of view, does, like, a plant medicine experience open up doors in that way?
very much so. And I have to say right off the bat that plant medicine isn't for everyone. But for me, I can only speak from my own personal experience. I think that I had intellectualized so much of the information that came through that actually would have supported my spiritual growth and the release of my ego. But because it stayed up in my head, I never actually moved forward. I stayed in the circles of
Or
stories that I repeated in the
or
patterns.
the same loop?
Yeah, the loops, right? And those were well-worn grooves in my psyche, and I had never really moved out of the head and into the body, and that makes a lot of sense because as children, we have to, let go of our authentic selves in order to stay attached to our caregivers. Gabor Mate talks about that, choosing attachment over authenticity. So,
Mm,
I had never really gotten back to that authentic self. I was still attached to attachment. And the first time that I experienced plant medicine was with psilocybin. And I had originally taken it because I had had cancer and I was experiencing just horrible PTSD around it coming back
mm,
and the fears of death and all of these things. And that was not the only issue in my life, right? Like there was this whole crescendo of the dark night of the soul occurring in my life, which was the universe saying, like, wake up already. And I tried to prep and all of these things. I did not do a very good job because I didn't really know any better. But even with the experience that I had a full body and spirit understanding that if I could let go of my guilt and shame, I could become light and love. And it was truly like I felt the love in my body and my spirit for the first time that I could ever remember in my life. And moving that out of my head and into my body was just the beginning of a journey. Because when I asked myself, to follow in my heart in my day-to-day decisions in my life, I was able to tap into that knowing,
Hmm.
that I had within for the first time, instead of just the stories or the books that I've read or the things that people told me. It was
Yeah.
like an inner knowing connection to the divine. Not everybody experiences that, especially not the first time. Sometimes, right? Like, I cannot speak for everyone, but for me, this has been an integral part of my journey and has fast forwarded my spiritual growth like nothing else.
It's interesting because I think a lot, like the walls that people put up. I was reading about like a music professor saying like learning music theory kind of constrains you as a musician because then you don't think outside the lines. That some of the best musicians never got trained theory and actually came up with innovations because they weren't limited by the box. And
Right.
I think that it's the logic. It's like if you put that theory, it's like a logic filter on a creative process that you box yourself in. And I think a lot of people get boxed in by philosophy, by social mores. They get blocked in by like their parents, their grandparents, or the societal, or the religious, or the social structures they're in, and it don't recapture that childlike innocence of like, well, why can't I do that? Before
Oh, I
you're
love
taught
that.
that you can't do it, the child is always willing to try something until they've learned, oh, you shouldn't do that.
I am so glad we're having this conversation. Yes. Yes, the box is like the ego of the collective and the generational ego patterns that have been passed down, all of the conditioning, right? If it's society, school, family, church, all of the things that condition us to say this is right and this is wrong. This is the way that we should be, right? Like we should ourselves to death. We should ourselves
Yeah,
into the box. And really, like, we are creation itself. We are an expression of the divine energy of creation. And the more that we can break through and let go of the attachment to the box that constrains us, the more we tap into the inner knowing, which is divine creation itself. So I love that because it makes me think about like the intuition. Okay. And so that's a really big part of not only my art process, but my coaching,
mhm,
because going back to that, like getting back into the body and into the inner knowing, we do so much in our heads, right? Like we're thinking our way through things instead of feeling our way through
yeah,
things. And I guarantee that most artists are like, people ask me, like, how do you know when you're done with a work? And I'm just like, I just feel like it's done. I just
yeah,
know. It's like an inner knowing, right? Or how do I know to put a blue here or a green there? It's just an intuitive process of knowing. And even if we have like steps that we need to take, right? Like I was doing some sewing today and I was thinking, all right, a lot of people ask me to teach art, but it's hard for me to teach an intuitive process. But I was like, but sewing is a very step by step
yeah, it's a
process
step
for
step
me.
process,
So, but there's a balance. And no matter what someone is doing, if they consider themselves a creative person, I guarantee they're tapping into some intuition.
yeah, yeah.
And that's
I
that
think
inner knowing.
what's inner knowing, it's also this idea why like a lot of what's going on in your head is like your subconscious mind, right? And I think a lot of artists, if they get rid of the barrier that when they're calling what they call the muse, is actually there's a lot of subconscious stuff in your head, and stuff in your heart and your soul that you're pulling into. That I think, like when people say they get that download, it's like
Yeah.
if you're a lot of artists I know that really create this flow state. They're in the flow state and they just come up with this amazing stuff. And then you ask them like you try to get them to like document what happened, and they have a hard time because it's kind of like it's very intuitive. It felt right. It's hard to describe. And you would try to go deconstruct it. The logic brain has a hard time because like this is in this kind of pure creative process. And then that's what people are always wanting, like masters to teach what they do. And some of it is like the download. There's a famous statement with Dylan where they were asking him, how did you write these lyrics in the 60s? And he said, well, I can't get back there. I can do something different now and I do create now, but I can't get back to that moment. It's like there's this magic thing that happened. And that
Yeah. He
magic thing that,
channeled it.
yeah, you can channel. And it's like, and people want you to like, well, I want you to be able to do that on demand. Well, sometimes you can't do it on demand. sometimes it happens when it's supposed to happen.
It always happens when it's supposed to happen.
Yeah. And if everybody wants you to be able to like hit that number again, and you'll hit it again, but you didn't actually hit it exactly the same way. And maybe it satisfies that requirement, but that's the kind of process of like the loops that people can get trapped in. It's like, oh, I like that loop. Keep on doing that. Keep on doing that. I'm like, well, that's antithetical to creative process because I might want to do something that I wasn't that comfortable with. Right?
Yeah.
To progress, you sometimes have to go where you're treading a little water, and that's not safe. And we always try to stay safe.
Mm.
And if you can get rid of some of your hangups, you not that you want to go into the danger zone all day, but sometimes you have to expand, and you're not going to
Yeah.
know the path fully. It's going to expand in front of you.
Yeah, I love that. I have this image of a wave coming into my head because I've been listening to David Hawkins, who is a spiritual teacher, and he has passed, but he has a lot of books. And he talks about like being in the present moment is like being on the edge of a wave, right? And it's just like you're not thinking about the past, you're not thinking about the future, you're just in the present moment, going, going, going. And when you're creating, there's that, you know, it's you said like it's not being comfortable all the time. There's not a sense of necessarily like danger, but you're on the edge. And when you're in the flow state and you're just being, if you're just being in the flow, you have like a loss of a sense of time
Yeah.
and you're channeling, you've got the downloads. It's irrepeatable because it's the present moment. It's just this like edge of presence.
It's like you're in the zone. Like if you ever asked like a musician that were on stage and they were in that zone where they're going through like and they're doing something like it's just like a fusion modal jazz band. They're like in the flow state. They're all kind of going off of each other. It wasn't a road. They don't really have a roadmap other than they can feel each other. They feel the vibe. They know where to go.
I
But the
love that.
roadmap is not fully clear, right? But they like being in that kind of danger zone compared to maybe a classical musician that knows this is Chopin. It goes this way. Where with the fusion jazz composition, it has a structure, but it can change. It could go into discordance. It could go into like micro timing changes that are not expected or known. You kind of go into newfound, unknown areas, and you're actually comfortable doing that. Where some other musicians are like more comfortable. I have to know where I'm going,
Hmm.
and I'm
It
like, well,
reminds me of life.
yeah. Well, sometimes you don't know where you're going.
That's right. Sometimes we don't know where we're going. And isn't it beautiful when we really learn to like go with the flow? And sometimes there's dissonance, and sometimes everything seems to be flowing harmoniously. And I'm not a musician, so I'm just like throwing out
Yeah,
the
well,
words.
there's discordance,
But
there's noise, there's harmony, and a lot of people like I do some of it, I just want they want the groove, they want the harmony. But in every piece, there's some they like the build up, crescendos, decrescendos, some dissonance, some things in they feel like a painting. There's some things in music that you kind of sound paint where like
yeah,
you could have something that's like a sharp or a flat that's a little off, but when you build on top of it, it becomes a whole. And so if some of the pieces of that whole could be a little off. The notes could be like if you just played them alone, you would think it doesn't work.
yeah,
But again, it was known like Brian Wilson was known for doing that in his orchestration. He'd have musicians to challenge him and say, "Well, that's in the wrong key." It says that's what the key is in my head. So we're gonna do it the way it is in my head.
I
And they
love
would
that.
be challenging him and say, "Well, that's not what you technically should do." It's like, no, we're gonna do it this way.
Yeah, it makes me think about so what first came to me, and this totally makes sense from an egoic self, like for myself, is that when you're first talking about, getting comfortable with the things that are maybe uncomfortable and going with the flow and like vibing with people and doing that dance right with others. And then now when you're speaking, I'm thinking, okay, well, sometimes when we judge the parts, it's like not seeing the forest through the trees, right? Or whatever. But then I'm like, okay, how can we apply that concept to the collective, right? So all of the ways that we judge individual people for doing the thing that we think doesn't fit or isn't right when it's playing on its own, that's like this judgment of the individual. But when we really zoom out and just go like, you know what, everything is perfect exactly the way it is, because everything is exactly as it should in this moment, and we're all evolving like as a collective, maybe we can accept more easily the parts of the whole, the notes that seem off key, the little dissonance here, the big dissonance there, and just be like, I trust that this song of the universe is going to play out the way it's supposed to play, and everyone has their part. And I don't know why, that tuba is doing what it's doing, but
Yeah,
I just have to trust that it's part of the song.
it's like the diversity of the moment. And some people want everybody to be in the same key.
Yeah.
They want everybody to have the same thought. It's like a macrocosm, microcosm. It's like people want to dictate, from like a macrocosm level, like an ideology, or a certain dogma, or they say that their opinion is fact,
Yeah.
rather than it actually being like a point of view. And then you're kind of stuck. Like, well, in order to fit in order to feel safe, to want to be accepted, then I can't have a discordant thought outside of that more. I have to fall in line to be in line. And
Yeah, all that self-judgment, right? Because every time that we're judging someone else, it's some part of ourselves that we haven't integrated yet. And so we're actually rejecting the part of the self that doesn't fit in with what we think, it should be part of the chorus. It's like we are judging our own off-key contribution to the whole chorus, thinking, oh my gosh, I'm not singing it right. I'm standing out. Everybody's listening to me as the one person who's standing out, right? There's all of that self, you know, judgment and people pleasing, like, oh, everyone's expecting me to, be part in this certain way. And instead of being like, you know what, I'm just going to focus on myself and love the way I'm showing up, and know that, if I'm singing my best song, that's all I can do.
it was like the looking glass self the Victorians talked about, like the introspection. That was talking about when the idea of self analysis, and then using that to say, well, it's okay to have this discordant thought that's outside the main point of view. It's that you're accepting yourself. There's like self-love. Is that kind of going to that? And I guess like in some cases, plant medicine might help you get closer to the self-love if your logical brain is keeping you from experiencing like the more creative side of your, like yin and yang. Is like there's that creative side, there's the more side that's in tune with your subconscious, in tune with the muse, in tune with the universe. There's the other one saying, well, I don't know, I can't accept the universe.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, could you imagine if the whole universe, like if everyone was doing everything that was in the box, like all creativity would stop. Everything would be extremely boring. There would be literally like a stop to evolution if everyone just agreed all of a sudden that there was one standard way of doing things and everyone should do it. It would be the most boring
Well, that's
universe
what you
ever.
see, like in the totalitarian governments or systems that don't work. And like look at North Korea, like your development is stunted. Like when you have a mindset that's very narrow and you've got to totally conform, then
Yeah.
conformity is the goal. To actually trying to get outside the box is against the law. So
Yeah.
when you have, so I was a political science major. So when you have certain social
Oh,
like concepts, like like from the Cold War, you could argue maybe that's not true, but in some scenario you can look at it like it limits creative development, limits potential advancements, and it limits art definitely because like art is too random. The
Right.
art
Art
is
is
too,
self-expression.
yeah, and it's like it can be if you have something where you're trying to have conformity, art is totally antithetical to that. And so if you have the artists were the first ones to go, they go after
Mm,
because we can't have this unconstrained lightning in a bottle because we can't control it. So,
mm,
so with that, and so the mindset to me to be a very expansive mindset will always kind of hit into the wall of the person that doesn't. They they have the canon. You have a canon in any kind of art, and when somebody goes outside the canon, they say, well, that's not right. Like a good example, like Miles Davis. He was like the bebop type of jazz, and then he went to fusion. And the pure jazz purists thought that bebop was really like jazz. And when he went outside of that, they said, "Well, that's not correct." So this whole genre wasn't correct because it's not what they consider in the canon. The same thing with like folk music people with Dylan when he went electric.
yeah.
Like you can't go outside of the folk structure because that's not music. That's something else. So like people will try to keep you in the box because it makes them feel comfortable. It's
Yeah.
what they know. And like when you challenge it, like, well, sometimes you're not gonna be like you're not gonna like law of attraction, they're not vibrating with you anymore. You're vibrating with somebody else.
Yeah. Yeah, the way we shift, as you're saying that, like, I have this automatic response now, when I hear something like this, where I just immediately start, like, asking myself, like, I go into self-inquiry, right? So, as soon as I think about other people doing something, like whether it's, saying that he shouldn't be going to electric guitar, I ask myself, or, like other people should be not going, when someone says, they shouldn't be going outside the box. I ask myself, oh gosh, how am I not allowing myself outside the box? How am I not allowing others outside the box? And that practice is just like this automatic thing now that I did not do for like 42
Yeah.
years of my life. But through plant medicine and Byron Katie, who has a whole worksheet on self inquiry, I've really learned to look at my own judgments and use every single thing as I become aware of them
Yeah.
to bring more self-awareness to my own way of showing up in the world, right? So like everything that we're talking about right now, I ask myself, like, in what way am I not stepping outside the box? And in what way am I judging others for stepping outside of the box?
It
Like, what
kinda
am
goes
I contributing?
it kinda goes back to the point that you're never really done, right? Sometimes.
Never.
So, like, an art piece could be done once you decide it's done, but, like, your development as an artist is never really done, right? So that piece might be a point in time, but what you did 5 years ago is not probably what you're doing 5 years from now, and
Right.
you might be influenced by other things. You might go into other areas unless you wanna what you think is correct is to be in your canon, is to stay within, like, "I'm gonna be an expressionist, and I'm just gonna stay in that." And that could be what you do, but you still advance as far as you can in that form. But no matter if you're true to yourself, a lot of things are actually influencing you and you're saying you're pure. But like a lot of times in your subconscious, it might be coming from other places and you're saying, well, no, I'm on the expressionist. But yeah, it's actually coming from something. It could be there's some abstract stuff coming in and you're like, oh no, no, I'm not that way. But you like it's almost like you get into a denial of like
Mm.
what are you actually like you're gonna be influenced by so many things, but you're trying to say, no, 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 I'm only this. And it's like,
Yeah.
how can you get out of that loop?
Yeah. And there is no destination, right? That's what I comes to mind when you say that. It's like it is the journey. The journey is the whole experience. It is the beingness. There is no destination. There's no end point. Like you said, like we're never finished.
Yeah,
We're
being a Buddhist,
always
I like
changing.
my next life, I can keep on progressing, so I don't actually even end. So, so,
And
so
we are life itself, right? We are one. That is one thing that I had no concept of before plant medicine. And now, after years of becoming a plant medicine facilitator, so I had to do a lot of experiences myself to really get to the point where I could hold space for others. And now I don't do that very often, but I don't do it at all now, but what I do is I help people with their integration after they have experiences elsewhere.
mhm.
And, um, you know, the oneness that I have experienced, um, coming back in another life, yes, right? Like we are life itself. We are, I am you, you are me, we are one, we are all just energy and these different expressions like consciousness experiencing itself. And after, I can intellectualize that and like say the words, but
Yeah,
it
yeah. It's a
means
more,
so little compared to actually feeling that
yeah, the
and
feeling is
having
more.
the inner knowing, in the spirit.
It's like the idea of like alchemizing experiences. Maybe you can talk about like how that happens. Because I think a lot of times it's like when I talk about synthesizing the inner
Mm,
and the outer is what a lot of artists can do. It's like a lot of what you do as an artist is like your own experiences, your own trauma, your own happiness, your own whatever emotion you're feeling, you can convey it. But it's
right.
also what you're picking up from the outside yourself, what you're picking up from the universe, from the ether. And it's a synthesis of that or the alchemy of that.
Yeah. Yeah, the alchemy, it's part of the creative process and it's part of the spiritual practice. So alchemy is known outside of the spiritual practices like turning lead to gold, right? There are books and all of the stories about that. But what I use it as now, like in my coaching, is turning the experiences of life from the heaviness of victimhood and the things we carry, the experiences that feel so heavy and difficult, turning them into experiences that remind us of the beauty of life, that shine a light on the ways that we've grown or developed or evolved because of the experiences we've had. Oftentimes we look back on regrets and say, oh, I shouldn't have done that or I should have done that. And the only reason we can even look back on it, things like that, and have a different perspective is because we've changed and our awareness is different now. And we show up differently now, right? So that is anytime we have a regret, we can instantly, if we're in the emotional space to do it, we can instantly change it into a gratitude for having changed enough to see it differently now, right? It's like, oh, I'm so grateful that I would never make that
Yeah.
mistake again, you know? And
Well,
so
I
that's an alchemization. And we do the same thing in art when we take emotions or, there are artists who take uh, stories of pain and turn it into
they
beautiful
turn it
works.
into
I
gold.
mean,
They turn it
yeah,
into
like I'm thinking of like what is it, Lemonade, the album Lemonade, right? That was
yeah.
like turning lemons into lemonade. Um, yeah, there's a real beauty in taking the raw materials of daily life experiences and turning them into the gold that feels like the magic and the blessing of the divine in our daily lives.
It's almost like you have to think like everybody, the ideal mindset is like, I don't want to go through pain. I don't want to go through remorse. I don't want to go through these. I want things to happen. I want to be happy. But a lot of times, like you have to be grateful for the times where you were sad or the times that things didn't work out because it's a learning experience. It's like if you wouldn't be you if you hadn't gone through it, and you don't get stronger by just having everything work out. So
That's
you should
right.
be thankful for the things that actually stressed you because they tested you and they got you to another place. And maybe you didn't make what you think it was the right decision. But because you experienced that, now you have like a whole arsenal of things like, oh, I can see this now. I can see that now. You can make a more informed decision than if you thought you were perfect, or if everything's perfect, like, well, how are you going to handle when something goes wrong?
That's right. And how can we bring compassion and love to others on their journeys when they're making, in quotes, mistakes, or when they are struggling? The more we can give ourselves the compassion and self-forgiveness for all of the things that we've done and how we've changed, we can also bring that to others and the rest of the world. And remember that when we know better, we do better, right? So we're always just doing our best with the inner and outer resources that we have in any moment.
Yeah, it's just living with the integrity, and also living with, like, knowing that, we're human. So being human
Yeah.
is like, you're not going to be perfect, but we have this tendency to strive for perfection, which I understand everybody does that. But the happy accidents, or the things that are unexpected, or things that you don't think or should happen, from a Buddhist perspective, it's like everything that's happened is supposed to happen, and so your path is there, and you're supposed to go through it. And so
Yeah.
you should be grateful and give yourself some grace for the things that happen, instead of being so hung up on, oh, I hate this moment. I'm so resentful with this situation or the people that are around it. Instead of saying, hey, I'm happy that you taught me this lesson.
Yeah.
I'm happy that I experienced this, even though it's something that wasn't a happy situation.
Right.
That's hard to
Right.
do, because you're like, a lot of mindsets were like, oh, I should be resentful. I should be angry. I want some payback. I want some redemptions. Like, you got to give it to me, or I got to feel like I'm on top. Like maybe that's not the game.
Yeah. Life is, for me anyway, and this is what I've seen in a lot of my clients too. It's like always giving us opportunities to let go of the roles and the identities that we've attached to. And we're doing it all the time, all the time we are labeling ourselves differently, but some labels are harder for us to let go of than others. For example, in fifth grade, we're fifth graders. In in our first job, we see ourselves as that employee. But over time, we let go of roles, but some of them, feel more um, like emotionally charged. It's if someday, if I were to lose my children, there's a sense of a loss of identity as a mother, or I was married, right? So my loss of identity as a wife. There
Mm.
are all sorts of possibilities out there and opportunities for us to let go of our attachments to our roles and our expectations. And I think art is actually a really great way to experience that. I remember when I was really little, because my grandmother was an artist, that my father, when I was making a painting when I was really young, I said, oh, I made a mistake here. Like, this isn't supposed to be like this part
Mm.
here. And he was like, nobody knows. You're the only one who
Yeah,
knows
knows that.
what
Yeah.
you expected in this piece of art, right? So, as I create a painting, let's say now, there's a whole process of letting go of my expectations of what I thought something should be in in a painting, even like a form. Sometimes I'll paint something and it's so beautiful and I absolutely love it. And then some crazy part of me is like, what if I do dots or lines or put a plant over this, right? And whatever I had originally created is like gone
Mhm.
forever. I
Yeah.
cannot get it back. I cannot take away the layer that I've just added to this painting. And so there's almost like this release and this letting go of what was there, and being like, I don't know why I painted over that, but I'm just going to trust the process. And by the time I finished a painting, I'm like, you know what? That's a beautiful layer that has contributed to the whole. I don't know why I had to paint over that part, and that's okay. And it's just like letting go of relationships, jobs, material things, all of the ways that the universe is reminding us that we are life itself, and all of these other things are temporary.
I think that's really important because if you think about like if you're on an acoustic instrument or you're painting, like you said, on the canvas, you have these kind of limitations. The limitation of, if you're on taping, if you're putting something on taping, you can overdub, but the still is it's like it's harder to change it. The problem I think we get today is because we're in this digital world, people, if you're a digital painter, you can go back. You can keep on. And I think that sometimes that is not advantageous to the human soul because you're not able to let it go because you can keep on going back and recreating the loop. And sometimes it's so maybe in the plant medicine or something that's more analog or more less changeable. They would like
Yeah.
once you make that decision, it's there, right? And you can't let it go. You gotta live with it. But we live in a world where a lot of stuff now is like, well, I can do the undo. And like, well, how does that help you move forward if you're always doing the undo?
Right. There are a lot of things I'd like to control Z in my life, but they've
Yeah,
already happened. Yeah, that's a really interesting idea. I do some digital work, and yes, I could see how going back would almost like delay my sense um of like the finality of every moment just passing by and being in the present moment. And I feel like I have to sit with that for a little bit. Like when when I'm creating digital art, yeah, yeah, I just don't find digital art as satisfying personally,
mm,
but because of the almost like the sculptural quality of creating something with my hands
yeah.
on another texture, but there are times that I use it for, like, fabric design and surface design,
But there's
and
a
yeah,
reason.
you can
There's
go
a
back and
reason.
just delete.
Yeah, that's the reason I use it. But I like worry with like younger artists, I when I first started, like you were limited to how many changes you could put down when you're actually writing a song with the old technology on tape. I mean, at some point you wouldn't do it. It actually was hard to do it. You wouldn't do it, so you let
Yeah,
it be. Now people can just you know undo, redo, do it
yeah,
over and over and over, and then not let it go. And I always talk with the younger artists is like you're kind of destroying the work because you're
mm,
like your original intentions getting lost in all
hmm,
these updates, all these changes you keep on making. And you've kind of lost like your way is like what were you trying to say? Now you've lost the narrative. And you
yeah.
let the technology kind of let you lose the narrative. And I was like, you kind of gotta let it not let the technology be a hindrance to your process.
Yeah. I some part of me feels like I know one when something, like, isn't teaching me anymore, the universe, like, takes me away from it. It's kinda like you were saying earlier when we're not vibing with certain people or situations, right? Those things fall away, and because as we change, our song changes, our vibration changes, like, the people that we used to that I should say used to really, like, complain with and go through my victimhood and my struggles and all of the things with, like, I don't resonate with that
Yeah.
experience as much anymore, and so the people that I'm drawn to and who are drawn to me, we talk about different things now, right? It's all like
Like a law of attraction. So
all the woo-woo.
it changes
Yeah,
like who's around based
right.
on where you are. So
Yeah,
if you're not who you were when you were 17, you had this group of people around you that vibed with you. By the time
right.
you're like 40, maybe those people don't vibe with you anymore. And
Right,
so
we attract, but
or
we
they
also
vibe in a
attract
different way.
Yeah, and we also attract the things we need to learn, right? Because the parts of ourselves that are those low notes, those parts of ourselves that are the shadows that we haven't like fully integrated and loved unconditionally, those are the parts of ourselves that are going to keep showing up until we finally deal with them and face them head on. So for me, when I was going through my facilitator training, I dealt with so many judgments. Like many of my ceremonies were me facing head on all of the people that I've judged and becoming them, which is like, oh my God, I was not happy about that. But then
Mm.
once I accepted it and surrendered to the process, it became more easily and I released a lot of my judgments. But I can tell you that my daily life for the situations and the people that I'm still having judgments around, like they are still part of my life. I am still given opportunities to look at that.
Mhm.
And so, whoever is experiencing the digital art world and is able to go back and delete, 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 and maybe they're not learning in that experience, maybe their digital art becomes more of like this zone out meditation, turn on the TV. I don't know. Maybe it's not like one of those progressing experiences, but other parts of their lives are going to
Yeah.
give them the opportunities to really say, hey, take a look at yourself, become aware of the way you're showing up in the world, learn all of the things that you're not learning in your creative life. Um, you know, I have no doubt that the universe is always going to give us exactly what we need.
Yeah, it's an evolution of our consciousness, and we live in an age where we have, the AI world and the robotic automation, very techy. And so, like, sometimes the purest artist, like, oh, I'm just gonna stick with my Stradivarius. I'm gonna stick with my Steinway. I can't play with these computers. But it's like you live in an age where, well, maybe that's a purest point of view, but maybe in order for music to evolve, you maybe have to play with these computers. So the mindsets can have these like constraints, and then to evolve is to start to say like, why am I saying I can't evolve, or why am I
Yes,
saying like I'm anti tech, I'm anti
right.
this, I'm anti progress, I'm anti futurism, because the futurism maybe it scares you. Right, so then you can't handle it because you're like, well, I don't like these robots. I don't like this automation. It does seem soulless to me. So it's like, well, how do you like? I'm looking for the soul. I'm looking for something more like tied to nature. So if you get back to like plant medicine and things like that, it's like people are like, well, I don't like pharmaceuticals because that's like tacky and it's using all these chemicals, and I don't like. So there's this mindset gets in. It's like, well, what's the balance between this
Mm.
world and that world, or what crossover can there be?
Yeah, I think you really hit the nail on the head with like, what are you afraid of? Right. So like when someone brings up something that's anti, there's some there's some fear in anything we're anti, because I think the ultimate condition of the universe is unconditional love and acceptance, right? And joy and bliss. So if we're anti something, there's some part of us that's being triggered that says, I don't want that because, and then it's some threat to safety or in the should, right, of this is the way things should be, or I'm afraid of change, I'm afraid of the unknown, I'm afraid of um, not having value if I can be replaced by technology. So instead of finding that external validation and the external safety, the journey for me anyway, and a lot of my clients, is like the journey of finding those things within. So when something comes up that we're anti, what is the fear that's being triggered? And then how can I find the answer to that fear within myself? How can I
Mhm.
find the inner safety, the inner value, the inner unconditional love and acceptance, and the release of control, and the surrendering, like, really letting go and surrendering to the universe and all that is, um, and alchemizing the opportunities of looking at our fears and turning them into the opportunity to know ourselves better.
Is insourcing part of that? The idea of insourcing?
Yeah. Exactly. That is the insourcing, is finding everything that we're looking for outside of ourselves, finding it inside. Easier said than done. And like I said before, right, I spent 40 years up in my head and looking outside of myself for all of the things that I thought would fill the hole in my soul. And then my spiritual journey took me on a different path, and it was inward. And it turns out that when I went inward, everything that I was looking for outside was inside all along.
That's interesting. I mean, I'm a child of the '70s, and if you go back to like Jim Morrison and the Doors, they kind of breaking through the idea of psychedelics for that generation with the Beatles and the Doors is like that you're gonna break through this wall. You're
Yeah.
gonna be able to find like breaking through these different dimensional walls in your soul, and find the truth or find your truth or find something that you're kind of is unseen but seen. Like, how do you get to that? Is that some of those myth or maybe the mystique in the '60s, is that different with plant medicine today? Is that people still coming with that point of view toward it?
Well, I think people approach plant medicine in a lot of different ways. It just depends on where they are in their egoic evolution. But I do believe, like deep down in my heart, that the truth has always been the same, right? Which is why so many of the spiritual teachers are just pointing in the same direction, which is unconditional love. And um, so if the psychedelics were bringing people to make love, not war, if, the psychedelics were bringing people to stepping outside of their egoic conditioning and the collective societal conditioning and letting them get in touch with their heart and the connection to nature, the connection to each other, right? Because judgments and the ego keep us separate. And the ego is always reminding us that we are this individual that has to protect ourselves in a way that is, not necessarily true to our inner knowing. It's just this constant survival mode, survivor, survive, survive. And psychedelics let us tap into that connectiveness of the love that is all things.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter when someone is connecting to those things, it's always true that love is the answer. It is all things, and it connects us all. It is the energy of the universe.
Yeah, it was kind of like the Beatles kind of made that the big note of the '60s, as like, find that love generation was like kind of tied to the idea of psychedelics and tied to mushrooms and looking inward and maybe disconnecting from maybe the industrialization and capitalism and trying to find Gaia or trying to get connected to the universe and find it like it's important to be connected to nature. It's important. It's not a foo-foo thing. Like it's something that you should want to as a human being. The earth is not separate from humans. I mean, there's some people who try the separation of humanity from the planet, from nature,
Right,
from
that's
animals. And the idea when you go back to indigenous, I'm part Cherokee and Blackfoot, is the idea, the Mother Earth, Gaia, spirit animals. The animals have consciousness, that we don't need to be proven that we
yeah,
believe it already. Like we don't have to have science tell me that. I mean, they're just people have like believed it. Um,
yeah.
but like you have to have somebody like say, give you a permission to say, "Oh yeah, the animal has the consciousness." No, I kind of saw that. I kind of know that.
Yeah. Oh gosh, I love that so much. Yeah, we are. Thank you for bringing that up, because we are one with all things. We are nature. We are we are nature. We are the earth. I had, in fact, if I can say this, I had this crazy, we had this crazy journey where I was in my judgment era, if you will, and I had this intention to see like a past life. Okay. Because in my group of my training group, there are all these people training with me, and everyone else was having experiences where they saw past lives. And I was like, I want to have one too. I was having journey envy.
Yeah.
And so I went and I was like, okay, this is what I want tonight. Hey, God, And so as soon as I get into the medicine, I zoom through this galaxy and I see myself in a tunnel. And in this like undulating earthy tunnel, there's this like life-sized grasshopper and maybe a mantis, I don't know, but they're sitting there just chilling in this tunnel and I'm walking towards them and the one sitting down is like, hey, what's up? And I'm like, oh, I'm a grasshopper. And I had this immediate judgment and disappointment that I had gone in with the intention to see a past life. And I was shown that I was a grasshopper. And as soon, like we're talking instantaneous, I had instantaneous judgment. And then in the next half second, I was hit with this full body and spirit question of, are you better than a grasshopper? And my answer was like, no. And I started crying and releasing all of this superiority that I felt to anything in nature. Like that's what, for me, the medicine has done. Like
help you break through
so
that.
many things.
Yes,
Yeah.
a lot of human
Oh,
beings have that because it gives us the permission structure to kind of treat the other animals or other beings on the planet as lesser than us. That so when we start to open our minds to like, hey, that animal has consciousness, it has feelings, it feels pain, it has sadness, it has aspirations, whether it's an insect or any level of any being on the planet, like there's feeling. But there are people telling you, oh, there's no feeling. If you do this to this animal, they don't feel it. Like really? That's there's a reason you want to say that because it gives you the permission to do what you're doing.
yeah.
So it's
It's
like
just an
people have to start to
opportunity.
question it to like, am I okay with that, or am I going to open my mind, and my heart, and my soul to seeing the harder truth that maybe isn't okay. What they've said is okay, right? That you actually are inflicting pain. That you were judging that they were lower than you, so you could do things that actually aren't really, positive.
Yeah, it comes back to what you said early on about integrity, right? Like the more we become aware and slow down in as many moments that we can to notice, are we living in integrity in every moment? And it connects us to our intuition too, right? Because our intuition, our inner knowing knows deep down when we're making justifications about things. It's like I deal with it if there's a cockroach in my house, right? Like some part of me goes into autopilot. I feel
Yeah,
totally afraid of the cockroach. I want to squish it. And now I can't squish cockroaches without feeling guilty, right? Like some part of me
yeah,
is like, okay, do I have the ability to just capture this guy and leave him and take him outside? And I'm like, oh, but I really just want to be done with this and not feel scared and grossed out in this moment. And then it's like, okay, but if I'm living in integrity and if I'm really present in the moment, can I honor its life, capture it with a little glass and a piece of paper, and take it outside? And how will I feel about myself? Because when we really slow down and we take a look at all the little things we do in our daily life that we justify out of an egoic response of self-interest, we really start to notice all the ways that we aren't living in integrity because that's not how we were conditioned, growing up.
yeah. Finding my daughter, she like started to really study like jumping spiders, and now when she recognizes a jumping spider, and now she lets it be, and she actually films it and doesn't kill it. And she has a habit of like if she finds any bug, she found a tool that allows you to take the bug without hurting it and put it outside. It's because she got like really into like if I don't have to kill this being, I'm gonna do everything I can not to.
Oh
If
gosh. Yes, because she okay, so because she learned about this other creature, right? This other being, and she therefore felt more connected to it. She moved from maybe something that was an adverse relationship with it to celebrating it and honoring it, treasuring it, right? Like that's the alchemy. Like she's doing the alchemy with the spider, right? Like what a beautiful example. And if it's okay with you, I'm going to use this example in the future because I feel so lit up right now with that transition, right? From something that is separate and maybe that others tell us that we should be afraid of. Others might tell us that it's gross or that we should not have them around. And then she's like, no, this thing is beautiful, amazing, really cool and interesting. And I'm going to like, just, it's a totally different mindset that changes the experience.
Yeah, it makes you more connected to, like, you start to realize that we're not the most important beings in the world. Where I think we get this tunnel vision, like we're the most important creature on the planet Earth. And if we start to actually step back from that and say, yeah, we're on the planet, but we're not the only beings on the planet. And so it's a mindset. It's hard to get into because we're kind of not taught to think that way. We're kind of taught to think we're the king of the hill. And it's easy to fall into that because then it's safer to stay in that, like we've been saying. But I think it's like if plant medicine can help you break that wall, if you're like looking glass self-examination, self-love, and understand there's nothing selfish about self-love because it's gonna have you have a better relationship with the world if you love yourself, right?
That's right.
It's super
That's right.
important.
I know I've been the worst to the external world when I was most out of touch with my self-love.
Yeah, super
Right?
important. People are like, that's where you start. But we always end up hitting our time mark faster than we ever imagined. We hit the hour. But we've had
Okay.
such a great conversation. And I do have your morganbstudio.com URL.
Yes.
So people click on that. What do they find there?
I have my art and my invitation to spiritual coaching as well there.
Oh, cool. So if they click on that will be fully clickable. And we do encourage people who listen or watch the show to click on morganbstudio.com. That will be clickable on our podcast description. We were just on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. We will be on platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcast, iHeartRadio, and Amazon Podcast by tomorrow. And I want to thank you for being on the show tonight. I think we had a really enlightening discussion.
Yeah, I absolutely loved it. You inspired so many different ideas, and my connection to the creative process with spirituality has been enlightened. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. Well, have a great night.
Thank you. You too.